This 4-year-old homeless girl is yanked by the hair from a wedding by the groom. But the millionaire who paid for the party saw everything and does something that shocks everyone. Watch until the end, you won't regret it. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The ballroom at the Stone Creek Ranch had never hosted such a lavish ceremony. White orchids imported from California adorned every table, and the Czech crystal chandelier cast golden light on the 200 most distinguished guests from the small town of Clear Creek, Colorado. Ryan Miller, 32, adjusted his Italian tuxedo for the 10th time that afternoon, his dark eyes surveying the room with satisfaction. Everything was perfect, exactly as he had dreamed since deciding to marry Isabella Davis. Isabella, 28, radiant in her French wedding gown, greeted guests with the practiced smile she had perfected over months. The daughter of a middle-class family in town, she had grown up watching the parties of the wealthy from behind gated fences, dreaming of the day she would be the star of such opulence. Now finally, her dream was coming true. In the back of the room, observing everything with a critical eye, was Octavius Otto Mendez, 67. The millionaire had financed the entire ceremony as a wedding gift for his nephew Ryan, his only remaining relative after years of betrayals and family disappointments. Otto was known in the region for his reserved and distrustful personality, the result of a childhood marked by poverty and humiliations he preferred to forget. His fortune, built with hard work in the mining industry, had become his only reliable companion. Father Joseph led the ceremony with solemnity, his words echoing through the silent hall. If anyone knows of any impediment to this marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. It was at that moment of sacred silence that she appeared. A small girl, no more than 4 years old, stumbled through the side door of the hall. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty, her torn dress barely covered her thin body, and her bare feet left tracks of dirt on the polished marble. Valentina Silva had spent the last 2 years living on the streets of Clear Creek since her mother, Marilia Santos, had mysteriously disappeared one night, leaving her alone in the world. The child looked around with big, frightened eyes, but also with a desperate hunger that had led her there. The smell of the sweets on the buffet table had attracted her senses, sharpened by need. She didn't understand ceremonies or social protocols. She only knew that she was hungry and that there was food in that place. Murmurs began quietly among the guests. Some ladies put their hands to their chests, shocked by the unexpected apparition. The men frowned, annoyed by the interruption. Father Joseph hesitated, losing the thread of the ceremony. Valentina, driven only by the instinct for survival, began to walk towards the dessert table. Each step she took on the cold marble echoed through the hall, creating a cruel contrast between her vulnerable smallness and the grandeur of the environment. She didn't know that she was causing the greatest embarrassment that society had ever witnessed. Ryan watched the scene for a few seconds, his face flushing with anger and shame. How dare they allow a beggar to invade the most important day of his life? How had that dirty child managed to get past security? His fists clenched, and an uncontrollable fury took over his thoughts. "What is that thing doing here?" he muttered through his teeth, loud enough for the guests in the first few rows to hear. Isabella held the groom's arm, noticing the growing tension in his muscles. "Ryan, she's just a child," she whispered, trying to calm him down. But Ryan had already lost control. He abandoned his place at the altar and marched toward the girl with firm, determined steps. The guests watched in absolute silence, as if they were watching an accident about to happen. Valentina had almost reached the table when she felt a strong hand grab her hair. The pain was instant and cruel. Ryan pulled her by the hair with disproportionate force, lifting her off the ground. The girl let out a cry of terror that cut through the air like a blade. "Get out of here immediately!" Ryan snarled, dragging the child by her hair toward the door. "How dare you invade my wedding? How dare you ruin the most important day of my life?" Valentina cried, and tried to break free, her small feet barely touching the ground as she was dragged. Her tears left clean streaks on her dirty cheeks, and her desperate sobs filled the deadly silence of the hall. The guests watched paralyzed. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if everyone was trapped in a nightmare from which they couldn't wake up. The contrast between the violence of the scene and the solemnity of the moment created unbearable tension. Otto felt something break inside his chest when he saw the child being mistreated. Memories of his own childhood came flooding back like an avalanche. He remembered when he was the same age as Valentina and was thrown out of a store for being dirty and poorly dressed. He remembered the humiliation, the pain, the feeling of being less than human in the eyes of others. Ryan reached the door and literally threw Valentina out of the hall. The girl fell on the stone floor of the courtyard, hurting her knees and hands. "And don't come back!" he shouted, slamming the door shut. When Ryan turned to return to the altar, he found 200 pairs of eyes fixed on him. The silence was deafening. Even the most conservative of the guests seemed shocked by the brutality they had witnessed. Otto slowly rose from his chair, his 67 years weighing on his shoulders like never before. His face was pale, but his eyes shone with a determination that no one had seen before. He walked to the center of the hall, each step echoing like a hammer on an anvil. "The party's over," he said, his voice low but filled with an authority that made everyone present shudder. Ryan stared at him confused. "Uncle Otto, she was just a beggar. Don't let this ruin our day." "Our day," Otto repeated, his voice rising. "There is no more our day, Ryan. I just witnessed something that reminded me exactly who you really are." The millionaire turned to the guests, his presence completely dominating the room. "I apologize to everyone, but this ceremony is cancelled. The costs will no longer be covered." A murmur of shock ran through the hall. Ryan paled, realizing the financial implications of what had just happened. "Uncle, you can't do this. We're talking about a lot of money, about commitments made." "I can and I will," Otto replied coldly. "And there's one more thing." He paused, looking directly into his nephew's eyes. "I'm going to adopt that girl." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the wind in the trees outside dared to make a sound. 200 people stood still, processing what they had just heard. Isabella put her hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Ryan gaped, unable to form words. The guests whispered among themselves, divided between shock and disbelief. Otto didn't wait for reactions. He headed for the door with determined steps, leaving behind a hall in complete chaos, a ruined wedding, and a decision that would forever change the fate of a 4-year-old girl who at that moment was crying alone in the stone courtyard, unaware that her life was about to take a completely different turn. Otto found Valentina exactly where Ryan had left her, huddled against the stone wall of the courtyard. The girl was trembling, not only from the cold of the Colorado afternoon, but from the trauma she had just experienced. Her knees were bleeding where she had scraped them on the ground, and she was holding a small piece of candy that she had managed to grab before being thrown out. It was the first sweet food she had tasted in weeks. When she saw the tall man approaching, Valentina tried to hide even more, expecting more violence. Her experience on the streets had taught her that adults usually meant danger, especially well-dressed ones, like the one now slowly kneeling in front of her. "I'm not going to hurt you," Otto said in the softest voice he could muster. His hands, used to shaking those of businessmen in multi-million-dollar deals, trembled slightly as he reached out to the child. "What's your name?" Valentina didn't answer. She had learned that silence was the best defense. Her big, dark eyes watched the man's every move, ready to run if necessary. The piece of candy remained clutched in her dirty little hand, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. My name is Otto, he continued, removing his tuxedo jacket and offering it to cover the girl's shoulders. I'm going to take care of you now. You don't have to be afraid anymore. The promise sounded empty to Valentina. Adults always said things they didn't keep. Her own mother had promised to be back in a few minutes 2 years ago, and she was still waiting. The girl remained silent, but allowed the warm jacket to cover her thin shoulders. Inside the hall, chaos had completely set in. Ryan paced back and forth like a caged animal, trying to process the magnitude of the financial disaster that had just befallen him. He had spent all his savings on the preparations, counting on his uncle's money to cover the larger costs. Now, not only would he lose the funding, but he would also face debts he couldn't pay. "This is crazy!" he shouted at Isabella, who remained motionless in her wedding dress. "He can't just cancel everything. We're family." Isabella watched her husband with eyes that were beginning to open to an uncomfortable reality. During their courtship, Ryan had been charming and attentive, always controlling his temper in her presence. But the violence with which he had treated the girl had revealed a side she had never imagined existed. "Maybe he's right," she murmured. "What you did to that child was—" "It was necessary," Ryan interrupted, turning to her with blazing eyes. "That beggar was getting in the way of our wedding, our party, our future. Our future built on top of his money," Isabella replied, bitterness tinging her voice. For the first time, she questioned whether she really knew the man she had just married. The guests were beginning to disperse, whispering among themselves about the scandal they had just witnessed. The most traditional families in town shook their heads in disapproval, not only at Ryan's violence, but also at Otto's impulsive decision. An unmarried man of 67 wanting to adopt a street girl. It was unprecedented and disturbing by Clear Creek's conservative standards. "Did you see what Otto said?" the mayor's wife commented to a neighbor. "Adopting a child at that age, it's not normal." "And a street child on top of that," the other replied, shaking her head. "Who knows what kind of problems she'll bring? Those children always come with vices, diseases." The malicious comments spread like wildfire. Within hours, the whole town would be talking about the reclusive millionaire's strange decision. In the courtyard, Otto continued trying to establish some kind of connection with Valentina. Each of her movements reminded him of himself as a child. The distrust, the fear, the constant expectation of being rejected or hurt. He remembered how he had felt invisible, as if he didn't deserve to occupy the same space as other people. "Are you hungry?" he asked, noticing how the girl was protecting the piece of candy. "I can take you to eat something hot." For the first time, Valentina raised her eyes to meet his. There was something different about this man. His voice didn't carry the impatience or irritation that she was used to hearing from adults. But still, she didn't trust him. Trust was a luxury a street child couldn't afford. Otto realized that it would take much more than kind words to win the girl's trust. He himself knew how difficult it was to believe in the goodness of others when you have lived a life of rejection and humiliation. Slowly, he took off his gold watch, a piece worth more than many houses in town, and placed it on the ground between them. "You can have this," he said. "To sell if you want, or just to have something that's yours." Valentina looked at the shiny object, confused. No one had ever given her anything of value. In fact, no one had ever given her anything except orders to get out of where she was. She hesitated, reaching out and touching the cold metal, but didn't pick it up. It was too beautiful to be real, too valuable to be hers. "It's yours," Otto repeated, gently pushing the watch towards her. "No strings attached. You don't have to do anything in return." This was Otto's first lesson on how to deal with a traumatized child. It was necessary to prove that his intentions were genuine through actions, not words. The gesture, though simple for him, represented something revolutionary in Valentina's life experience. Meanwhile, inside her luxurious house in the center of town, Connie Alves, 58, watched the unusual activity on the streets through the window of her small apartment. Otto's former housekeeper had been fired 3 years earlier, accused of stealing family jewelry. The accusation had destroyed her reputation in town, forcing her to live on a small pension and sporadic sewing jobs. Connie knew the truth about her alleged crime. She knew who had really stolen the jewelry and why she had been chosen as a scapegoat. But she also knew that no one would believe the word of a maid against that of a member of the Mendez family. For 3 years, she'd kept her knowledge silent, waiting for the right moment. Rumors about the cancelled wedding and Otto's decision reached her through her neighbor, who worked as a cleaner at the banquet hall. Connie felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Satisfaction because Ryan had finally shown his true colors publicly. Concern because she knew Otto well enough to know that he had no idea how to take care of a child. "He's going to need help," she muttered to herself, looking at her own hands, calloused from work. "And maybe it's time for some truths to come to light." Back in the courtyard, Valentina finally picked up the watch, holding it as if it would break at any moment. It was the first time in her short life that she possessed something that wasn't strictly necessary for survival. The weight of the metal in her small hands seemed to symbolize something greater, the possibility that her life could be different. "What's your name?" Otto asked again, his infinite patience contrasting with the haste that usually characterized his business negotiations. "Valentina," she whispered, so softly that he had to lean in to hear. It was the first word she had spoken in weeks. "Valentina," he repeated, smiling for the first time in years. "It's a beautiful name." "Would you like to come with me, Valentina? I have a big house with warm food and a soft bed." The girl looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression had changed. It wasn't trust, not yet. But maybe it was the first sign of hope she had felt since her mother disappeared. Slowly, very slowly, she nodded her head. Otto felt a tightness in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in decades. For the first time since childhood, he felt he was doing something truly important. Not for money, not for business, but for something much more fundamental. For human love, for compassion, for justice. He stood up and held out his hand to her. Valentina hesitated for a moment, looked at the hall where the noise of arguments could still be heard, then at the man who had offered her the first act of kindness she had ever known. Slowly, she placed her dirty little hand in Otto's large, calloused hand. It was the beginning of a journey that would test the limits of love, patience, and determination of both of them. Otto's mansion, located in Clear Creek's most affluent neighborhood, had never received such small visitors. Built in the classic American colonial style, with its whitewashed walls and pitched roof, the imposing house contrasted sharply with Valentina's frail figure, who hid behind the millionaire's legs as she watched the immense rooms with wide, fearful eyes. Each step they took through the marble hallway echoed eerily, making Valentina shrink even further. She had never been in such a large and silent place. In the streets, there was always noise, cars, people shouting, children playing. There, the silence was oppressive, almost threatening to a child accustomed to urban chaos. "This will be your home now," Otto said, trying to sound comforting, but his own voice echoed strangely in the empty space. The mansion, which had always seemed like a perfect refuge to him, now seemed cold and intimidating in the eyes of a child. Valentina didn't answer. Since she had whispered her name in the courtyard, she had returned to total silence, as if words were a resource too precious to be wasted. Her small hands clutched the gold watch that Otto had given her, the only tangible object that proved that all this was not just a cruel dream. The first major difficulty arose at bath time. Otto had prepared the guest room bathtub with warm water and perfumed soap, imagining that Valentina would be happy to clean herself after so long on the streets. However, when the girl saw the amount of water, she panicked completely. "No, no!" Otto! She screamed, running to the farthest corner of the bathroom and curling up on the floor. It was the first time her voice had sounded loud since arriving at the house, but it was a sound of pure terror. Otto stood paralyzed. In all his 67 years, in all the complex negotiations he had conducted, he had never felt as lost as he did at that moment. He had no idea what had triggered the child's fear, nor how to deal with that situation. "It's okay," he tried, keeping his distance so as not to scare her more. "You don't have to take a bath now." But Valentina continued to tremble in the corner, her eyes fixed on the bathtub as if it were a monster about to devour her. For a child who had survived on the streets, large amounts of water were dangerous. She had seen other children drowned by evil adults. She had learned to distrust any situation where she couldn't escape quickly. Otto drained the bathtub and sat on the floor at the same height as the girl. "We can try with less water," he said softly, "or with a wet towel. You decide." It was at that moment that he realized the magnitude of the challenge he had taken on. It wasn't just about giving shelter and food to a child. It was about healing deep wounds that he couldn't even fully understand. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Ryan was facing his own crisis. The banquet hall charged $100,000 for the services. The buffet demanded another $80,000, and the hired band threatened to sue for breach of contract. He had spent his last savings on the groom's attire and the planned honeymoon, relying entirely on his uncle's funding. "You need to talk to him," said Isabella, still wearing her crumpled wedding dress. She had spent the last 2 hours sitting in her living room, trying to process everything that had happened. "Your uncle can't just leave us in this situation." "You think I haven't tried?" Ryan exploded, kicking a chair violently. "I've called 15 times. He doesn't answer. He's too busy playing daddy with that little beggar." Isabella cringed at her husband's aggressiveness. It was the second time in the same day that she had seen that side of him, and she began to wonder how many other unknown facets he was hiding. "Maybe if you apologized," she suggested hesitantly. "Apologize?" Ryan laughed bitterly. "For what? For throwing an intruder out of my own wedding? For defending our ceremony? I'm not going to apologize for doing what any decent man would do." The justification sounded hollow even to him. Deep down, Ryan knew he had lost control, that his reaction had been disproportionate, but admitting that would mean accepting that Otto was right, and that was something his wounded pride couldn't bear. That same night, Connie Alves made a decision that would change the course of events. She walked through the dark streets of Clear Creek until she reached the gate of Otto's mansion, the same gate she had crossed every day for 15 years as the family's housekeeper. The night watchman recognized her immediately. "Connie, what are you doing here so late?" "I need to talk to the boss," she said with determination. "It's about the child he brought home." When Otto received the message, his first impulse was to refuse the visit. Connie represented a painful part of his past, a betrayal that had shaken his already fragile trust in people. But something in the urgency of the message made him reconsider. He met the former housekeeper at the gate, her grey hair tied in a simple bun, her calloused hands interlaced nervously. 3 years had passed since the last time they had seen each other, but she seemed to have aged a decade. "Connie," he said coldly, "what do you want?" "I came to offer help," she replied directly. "I know you brought a girl home. I also know that you have no idea how to take care of a child, especially one who has lived on the streets." Otto felt his defensiveness increase. "And why would you care after what you did? I didn't steal your jewelry," Connie interrupted, her voice laden with 3 years of contained bitterness. "And you know that. Deep down in your heart, you always knew." The silence that followed was tense and charged with unspoken meanings. Otto studied the face of the woman who had taken care of his house for 15 years, looking for signs of lying, but finding only weariness and determination. Even if that were true, he said slowly. "Why would you help me now?" "Because that child is not to blame for our fights," Connie replied. "And because I know what it's like to grow up without anyone to properly care for you." At that moment, a sharp scream came from inside the house. Otto ran towards the sound, finding Valentina in the middle of the hallway, trembling violently. She had woken up from a nightmare, and not recognizing the environment, had panicked completely. "Mommy! Mommy!" she cried, calling for a mother who hadn't been there for 2 years. Her small hands beat in the air as if she were fighting something invisible. Otto approached slowly, but each of his movements seemed to intensify the girl's despair. He didn't know how to comfort her. He didn't know what words to use. He didn't even know if he should touch her. It was then that Connie appeared behind him. Without asking permission, she knelt on the floor and began to sing an old folk song, her soft, maternal voice filling the cold hallway. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Mama's going to buy you a mockingbird." Miraculously, Valentina began to calm down. Some deep memory had been touched by the familiar melody, perhaps a distant memory of her own mother singing the same song. Her sobs gradually subsided until they turned into irregular breathing. Connie continued singing until the girl fell asleep on the floor of the hallway, exhausted by her own despair. Only then did she look at Otto, who was watching the scene with an expression of deep inadequacy. "She needs routine," Connie said softly. "She needs someone who understands that traumatized children don't behave like normal children. She needs patience, knowledge, experience that you don't have." Otto looked at Valentina, sleeping on the cold floor, her small body curled up in a defensive position even in her sleep. For the first time since making the impulsive decision at the wedding, he began to question whether he could really take care of that child. "What do you want in return?" he asked, his voice laden with distrust built up over years of betrayals. "The truth," Connie replied simply. "I want you to find out who really stole your jewelry. I want my name cleared, and I want that girl to have a chance to be happy." Otto carried Valentina to the bedroom, covering her with a soft blanket. As he watched the peaceful face of the sleeping child, he realized that he had completely underestimated the complexity of the situation. Adopting Valentina would not just be a matter of giving her a home and food, it would be a challenge that would test all his emotional and practical limits. And maybe, just maybe, he couldn't face that challenge alone. Outside the room, Connie waited for his answer, carrying secrets that could change everything. Valentina's first night in the mansion was just beginning, and it was already clear that it would be much more complicated than Otto had imagined. The first rays of sunshine in the morning found Otto awake in the armchair next to Valentina's bed, watching the child's every breath as if she could disappear at any moment. He had spent the entire night in vigil, disturbed by the cries she had made during the nightmares. With each start of the girl, he felt his own inadequacy grow like an open wound. Valentina woke up slowly, her big eyes scanning the luxurious room with confusion. For a moment, she seemed not to remember where she was, and Otto saw panic begin to form in her expression until she found the gold watch clutched against her chest, reminding her of the events of the previous day. "Good morning," he said softly, trying not to scare her with sudden movements. Valentina didn't answer but sat up in bed, watching him with that familiar distrust. She had learned on the streets that the first moments of each day were crucial. It was when you found out if the adults were still kind or if the mask had fallen off during the night. The doorbell at the main entrance interrupted the delicate moment. Otto knew who it was without needing to check. Connie had promised to return in the morning, bringing with her the answers he both feared and longed to hear. "I'm going to answer the door," he said to Valentina. "You can stay here or come with me if you want." To his surprise, the girl slipped out of bed and followed him at a safe distance, curious about who was visiting. Since arriving at the mansion, she had noticed that there were no other people there. No women, no children, no sounds of family life. It was as if the man lived completely alone in that immense place. Connie was at the gate carrying a cloth bag and a determined expression that Otto recognized from the times when she worked for him. It was the same expression she had when she decided to completely reorganize the pantry or confront incompetent repairmen. "I brought some things for the girl," she said, showing the bag. "Clothes I got from the neighbors, some simple toys, and ingredients to make porridge suitable for malnourished children." Otto hesitated at the entrance, still struggling between the practical need for help and the distrust he had cultivated for 3 years. But when he looked at Valentina hiding behind his legs, wearing only a huge men's t-shirt that he had found for her, he realized he had no choice. "Come in," he said, opening the gate. Connie passed him with the naturalness of someone who had made that movement thousands of times before. Valentina watched the woman with curiosity. It was the first female person she had seen since arriving at the house, and something in her presence awakened confused memories of maternal care. "Hello, little one," said Connie, crouching down to get to Valentina's height. "You must be hungry. How about we have a real breakfast?" The promise of food made Valentina's eyes light up, but she still didn't come out from behind Otto. Connie understood immediately. She had seen many traumatized children during her years of social work at the church. "I'll prepare something in the kitchen," she said, turning to Otto. "Meanwhile, you can tell me exactly what happened yesterday. The whole truth." In the spacious kitchen, while Connie prepared oatmeal with fruit, Otto recounted the events of the wedding. With each detail about Ryan's violence, the housekeeper's face hardened more. "I warned you about him," she said finally, stirring the oatmeal with precise movements. 3 years ago, when you fired me, I tried to tell you the truth about the jewelry. But you preferred to believe his word." "The evidence seemed clear," Otto defended himself, but his voice carried less conviction than before. "The jewelry was found in your house." "It was planted there," Connie replied bluntly, "by Ryan, because I had found out about his gambling addiction and threatened to tell you." Valentina, who had timidly approached the kitchen attracted by the smell of the food, watched the conversation without fully understanding the words, but picking up on the tension between the adults. She had developed a sharp instinct for conflicts and knew that something important was being discussed. Connie served the oatmeal in a small bowl and placed it on the low table she had improvised with cushions on the floor. "Come on, honey," she called to Valentina. "This will do you good." The girl hesitated, looking at Otto for approval. When he nodded, she approached cautiously and tasted a spoonful. The sweet and nutritious flavor made her eyes close with pleasure. It was the first proper meal she had had in weeks. "Ryan has always been trouble," Connie continued as she watched Valentina eat. "Since he was a teenager, gambling, debts, constant lies. You just didn't see it because you wanted to believe you had a family." The words hit Otto like stabs. For years he had clung to the idea that Ryan was all that remained of his family, ignoring obvious signs of problems. "Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" he asked. "I did, several times. But you always found excuses for him," Connie sighed heavily, "and when I finally decided to be more direct, he framed me." At that moment, Otto's phone rang. It was Ryan, calling for the 20th time since the previous night. This time, Otto decided to answer. "Uncle, we need to talk," Ryan said on the other end of the line, his voice laden with a desperation he tried to disguise as concern. "I'm very sorry for what happened yesterday. It was the wedding jitters, you understand." "Sorry," Otto repeated, looking at Valentina, who was eating her oatmeal in silence. "What exactly are you sorry for, Ryan?" "Everything. The way I treated the girl, the way I reacted when you announced that decision. I've been thinking all night, and you're right. Someone needs to take care of her." The sudden change of attitude sounded too false, even for Otto's hopeful ears. "You weren't worried about her yesterday when you dragged her by the hair." I know. It was terrible. But we can solve this, can't we? We're family, and about financing the party. Well, I've already paid some suppliers with my own savings. I'm just waiting for your help to pay off the rest." There was the real motivation. Otto felt his previous naivety fading like mist in the sun. "How much do you owe, Ryan?" There was a revealing pause. "It's not much. 200,000, maybe 300. $300,000? Otto exploded. The number was much higher than any party should cost. "What did you spend so much money on?" "On the preparations, on the hall, on the band." Ryan stammered, clearly lying. "You know how expensive these things are." Connie, who was listening to the conversation, shook her head significantly. She knew exactly where that money had been spent, at the poker tables of the region's underground casinos, an addiction that Ryan had fueled for years. "I'll think about it," Otto said coldly, hanging up the phone. "He lost it all gambling, didn't he?" Connie asked. "How do you know?" "Because that's what he always did. The difference is that now the stakes have gotten higher." Connie approached the table where Valentina was finishing her oatmeal. "I can tell you exactly where your jewelry ended up, and I can prove it." Otto felt his familiar world begin to crumble definitively. "How?" "Because I followed him the night they disappeared. I saw him leave the house at 2 in the morning. I saw him meet the loan sharks downtown. I saw him hand over your jewelry as collateral for a debt." Connie took a deep breath. "And the next day when you discovered the theft, I tried to tell you the truth. But Ryan came first, with the story that I had disappeared during the night, planted some pieces in my house, and you preferred to believe him." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Valentina, sensing the tension, stopped eating and looked alternately at the two adults, her survival instincts alerting her to possible danger. "Why didn't you insist more?" Otto asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Because you didn't want to hear. Because admitting that Ryan was a thief would mean admitting that you were completely alone in the world, and that was something you couldn't face at the time." The words were cruel in their honesty, but Otto recognized the truth in them. For years, he had clung to the illusion of family represented by Ryan because the alternative, complete solitude, was unbearable. "And now?" he asked. "Now you have something more important than a lying nephew to take care of," Connie said, looking at Valentina. "Now you have a chance to make a difference in the life of someone who really needs it." Valentina had finished eating and approached Otto, timidly leaning against his leg. It was a small gesture, but laden with meaning. She was beginning to see him as protection, not as a threat. "She's starting to trust you," Connie observed. "Don't waste that." At that moment, the phone rang again. This time it was Isabella. "Mr. Mendez." Her voice was trembling and frightened. "I need to talk to you. It's about Ryan. I found something terrible." The tone of desperation in the young woman's voice made Otto realize that the revelations of the day were just beginning. "What did you find out, Isabella?" "I can't talk on the phone. Ryan is out, but he'll be back soon. Please, I need to see you today. It's about money he owes to very dangerous people." The call was abruptly interrupted, leaving Otto with more questions than answers. He looked at Connie, who had watched the conversation with growing concern. "Things are going to get worse before they get better," she said simply. "Ryan won't give up the money easily, and desperate men do desperate things." Valentina pulled at Otto's shirt, drawing his attention. When he looked down, she was offering him the gold watch, the first gift she had received in her life. "For you," she said, in her weak little voice, the first complete sentence she had spoken since arriving at the house. The simple gesture broke something inside Otto's chest. That child, who possessed nothing in the world, was offering her only treasure to comfort him. "You can keep it," he said, kneeling down to get to her height. "It's yours forever." But when Valentina smiled for the first time, a small and hesitant but real smile, Otto knew that the battles to come would be worth it. Connie watched the scene with approval. "Now we need to prepare," she said, "because Ryan won't easily give up what he considers to be his money." Outside, dark clouds were beginning to form in the Clear Creek sky, foreshadowing the storm that was to come. Afternoon was falling on Clear Creek when Isabella managed to escape from home to find Otto. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands trembled visibly as she held a folder of documents against her chest, as if it were a protective shield. She had waited for Ryan to leave to resolve another of his urgent negotiations, to finally reveal what she had discovered. "Mr. Mendez, thank you for seeing me," she said, as Connie led her to the main room. Valentina watched the young woman from afar, hidden behind the armchair where Otto was sitting. The girl had developed a keen instinct for recognizing people in distress. "What happened, Isabella?" Otto asked, noting the young woman's emotional state. "You seemed desperate on the phone." Isabella took a deep breath and opened the folder, spreading documents on the coffee table. "I found this hidden in Ryan's office. Contracts, receipts, collection letters." Her voice faltered for a moment. "Mr. Mendez, my husband owes much more than $300,000. Otto picked up one of the documents and felt the blood run cold in his veins. It was a loan agreement with professional loan sharks from Denver, worth $500,000, with astronomical interest rates and clauses that included physical guarantees in case of default. "This is dated 6 months ago," he murmured, examining other papers. "He already owed that amount before he even planned the wedding." "There's worse," Isabella said, her voice almost a whisper. "Look at this here." She showed a document that made Otto get up abruptly from the armchair. It was a forged power of attorney, with his signature falsified, giving Ryan the power to use family properties as collateral for loans. "This is impossible," Otto said. But even as he spoke, he recognized the skill with which his signature had been imitated. "When was this done?" 2 months ago, soon after he started planning the wedding." Isabella wiped the tears that streamed down her face. "I only found out because a man showed up at the house this morning, looking for him. A very scary man, with scars on his face." Connie, who was listening to everything while preparing tea to calm everyone's nerves, approached the table. "What did this man look like?" she asked. "Tall, strong, spoke with an East Coast accent. He said his name is Marco, and that Ryan has until the end of the week to pay what he owes, or—" Isabella couldn't finish the sentence. "Or what?" Otto insisted. "Or they will collect in other ways. And they mentioned you, Mr. Mendez. They said they know you have money to cover your nephew's debts." The silence that followed was tense and heavy. Valentina, sensing the charged atmosphere, came out from behind the armchair and approached Otto, timidly touching his hand. The child's simple gesture brought him back to the reality of what was at stake. "There are more documents," Isabella continued, pulling another paper from the folder. "Ryan also falsified contracts for the mining company. He sold mining rights that didn't belong to him." Otto took the document with trembling hands. It was true. Ryan had sold mining rights to land belonging to the company to a group of investors from New York, pocketing $2 million that had disappeared at the gambling tables. "My God," Connie murmured. "He didn't just rob you, Otto. He committed corporate fraud." "And now the buyers are claiming the mining rights," Isabella said. "Summonses arrived this morning. If you don't honor the sale, they will sue you for fraud." Otto sat down heavily, the weight of the betrayal and the legal implications falling on him like an avalanche. In a single morning, he had discovered that his nephew had not only robbed him, but also involved him in crimes that could destroy his company and his reputation. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked Isabella. "Ryan is your husband." "Because I'm pregnant," she replied, placing her hand on her still flat womb. "I found out yesterday morning before the wedding, and I can't raise a child with a man who is capable of doing these things." The revelation brought a new dimension to the drama. Isabella was not only facing her husband's betrayal, but also the implications of carrying his child. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Connie asked with the maternal concern that had always characterized her. "My parents rejected me when I decided to marry Ryan against their will. They said he was no good, that I was fooling myself." Isabella laughed bitterly. They were right all along. At that moment, the sound of tires screeching at the entrance to the mansion made everyone tense up. Ryan had arrived, and from the noise he was making, he was furious. "Isabella, Isabella, I know you're there," he shouted from the gate, his voice laden with anger and desperation. "Come home now. We don't have time for this nonsense." Valentina immediately ran to hide behind the sofa, her survival instincts alerting her to danger. The girl had learned to recognize the signs of imminent violence in the voice of adults. "He can't come in here," Otto said, standing up. "This is my property." "He's desperate," Connie murmured, "and desperate men are unpredictable." The shouts continued from outside. "Uncle Otto, I know you're plotting something against me." "Isabella, if you don't come out of there in 5 minutes, you'll regret it." "He's never spoken to me like that before," Isabella whispered, trembling. "Not even in the worst times." Connie approached the window and watched Ryan pacing back and forth in front of the gate like a caged animal. "He's not just nervous," she said. "He's in total panic. He must have received more pressure from the loan sharks." As if he had heard, Ryan's phone rang loud enough to be heard from inside the mansion. Everyone could hear his voice rising an octave as he spoke to someone. I know, but I need more time. The money is guaranteed. My uncle has millions." There was a pause. "No, don't do that. I'll get the money by Friday." When the call ended, Ryan began to punch the iron gate with his fists, shouting in frustration. "Open this door! Open it now! It's about life and death." Otto made a decision. He went to the gate intercom and pressed the button. "Ryan, I'm going to open the gate, but you come in unarmed, without your lies. We already know everything." "What are you talking about?" Ryan shouted, but his voice faltered slightly. "About the real debts, about the falsified signatures, about the fraudulent sale of mining rights. Isabella brought all the documents." The silence that followed was ominous. When Ryan finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, more dangerous. "She shouldn't have done that," he said slowly. "That will complicate everything for all of us." Otto opened the gate and Ryan entered, but the man who appeared in the room was not the same nephew he knew. Ryan's face was pale and sweaty, his eyes red and unfocused, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Uncle, you don't understand the gravity of the situation," he said, completely ignoring Isabella and Connie. "These people aren't messing around. If I don't pay by Friday, they'll come after you and your new little girl." The veiled threat made Otto instinctively position himself between Ryan and the sofa where Valentina was hiding. "Are you threatening a child?" he asked, his voice laden with a dangerous coldness. "I'm not threatening anyone," Ryan exploded. "I'm trying to protect all of us." "Do you think adopting a beggar is more important than saving our family?" "Our family?" Otto repeated. "After I discovered that you robbed me, lied to me for years, forged my signature and sold properties that weren't yours?" Ryan paled even further. "Isabella told you everything, didn't she?" he said, turning to his wife with blazing eyes. "You traitor! I trusted you." "You trusted me?" Isabella shouted, standing up abruptly. "You used me, planned to marry me, just to have access to your uncle's money. Did you think I didn't know?" "Of course it was for the money," Ryan shouted back. "What did you think it was for? For your beauty? For your personality? You're as naive as he is." The brutal insult left Isabella speechless, but revealed Ryan's true nature to everyone present. Connie approached the young woman and placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "Now we know who you really are," Connie said to Ryan. "The question is, what do you intend to do?" Ryan took a deep breath, trying to regain some control over the situation. "I intend to resolve this in the only way possible. Uncle, you are going to lend me $2 million. Now." "Never," Otto replied without hesitating. "Then you're going to be responsible for everything that happens," Ryan said, heading for the door. "When those men come to collect, and they will come, remember that you could have prevented this." He stopped at the door and looked back one last time. And watch out for your new little girl, Uncle. Clear Creek is a small town. Accidents happen." After his departure, the silence in the room was oppressive. Valentina emerged slowly from behind the sofa, her big eyes fixed on the door through which the bad man had left. "He wasn't kidding about the dangers," Isabella said, her voice trembling. "Those men who came today, they know where you live, Mr. Mendez. They know about Valentina." Connie looked out the window, watching Ryan speed furiously down the street. "We need to prepare," she said. "Things are going to get much worse before they get better." Otto picked up Valentina, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. Protecting that child meant facing dangers he had never imagined. But when Valentina rested her head on his shoulder, trusting him completely, Otto knew that he would face any danger necessary. The war for Valentina's safety was just beginning. The days following the confrontation with Ryan brought a tense but structured routine to the mansion. Connie had temporarily moved into the maid's room, officially taking on Valentina's practical care, while Otto dealt with the legal implications of the discovered fraud. The female presence in the house had completely transformed the atmosphere. There was the smell of home-cooked food, small clothes drying on the line, and for the first time in years, sounds of family life echoed through the halls. Valentina was beginning to show signs of adaptation. Although she still didn't speak regularly, she had stopped hiding every time someone approached. Connie noticed that the girl watched everything with a sharp intelligence, quickly learning the routines of the house and memorizing the times of each activity. It was as if she was creating a mental map of safety, mapping all possible shelters and escape routes. "She's smarter than she looks," Connie commented one morning, while watching Valentina playing silently with makeshift dolls made of cloths. Street children develop a practical intelligence that most adults don't possess. Otto, who was spending more and more time at home to watch for possible threats, observed Valentina with a mixture of fascination and concern. Each small progress of the girl, eating without hiding the food, sleeping for a few hours in a row without nightmares, seemed like a miracle, but also reminded him of how fragile that recovery was. It was on a Thursday afternoon, 3 days after the confrontation with Ryan, that Isabella appeared at the door of the mansion with 2 suitcases and an expression of determination that contrasted with her apparent fragility. "I have nowhere to go," she said directly to Otto. "Ryan emptied our bank account last night. He took everything. My savings, the money my parents gave me as a wedding present, even my engagement ring that was worth a few thousand." Connie opened the door completely, not needing Otto's permission to know that they would not leave a pregnant woman on the street. "Come in, honey. We have plenty of room." "Did he hit you?" Otto asked, noticing a discreet bruise on Isabella's wrist. "He tried," she replied, raising her chin with wounded pride. "But I learned a few things growing up with 3 brothers. He didn't expect me to react." Valentina watched the conversation from afar, her big eyes fixed on Isabella's bruised face. There was something familiar about that scene, a wounded woman seeking refuge, just like her own mother had done so many times when she was even younger. "You don't understand," Isabella continued, dropping the suitcases in the room. "Ryan isn't just desperate for money. He's completely out of control. Yesterday he spent the entire night on the phone with those loan sharks, begging for more time. I heard him say he had alternatives to get the money." "What kind of alternatives?" Connie asked, a growing concern in her voice. "He mentioned something about living guarantees, and he talked about you, Mr. Mendez, said he knows someone who would pay a lot of money to hurt you." The silence that followed was charged with terrifying implications. Otto had built his fortune in mining, a business that inevitably created enemies, defeated competitors, displaced communities, unbribed politicians. The idea that Ryan could be selling information about his routine and vulnerabilities to those enemies was frightening. "Did he say names?" Otto asked. "A guy named Frederick from a competing company from Denver." Ryan said that this man has always wanted to destroy you. Isabella paused, remembering more details. And there's more. He talked about a federal investigation that may be coming. Something about environmental irregularities in your mines. Otto felt the ground collapse beneath his feet. Frederick Campos was the owner of the largest competing mining company, a man known for using questionable methods to eliminate competitors. If Ryan was providing privileged information to him, "We need to get out of town," he said abruptly. "Right now." "And go where?" Connie asked. "You have a company to run, employees who depend on you. You can't just disappear." "I can't risk Valentina's life because of my business." At that moment, as if she knew she was being discussed, Valentina approached the group of adults. She had noticed the growing tension in their voices and, with her sharpened survival instinct, wanted to be close to Otto, the person she had learned to trust. "Grandpa," she said suddenly, the word coming out clear and firm from her small mouth. Everyone stopped talking instantly. It was the first time Valentina had directly addressed Otto, and the chosen word, "Grandpa," carried a devastating emotional meaning. Otto knelt in front of the girl, his eyes filling with tears he couldn't control. "What did you say, little one?" "Grandpa," Valentina repeated, placing her little hands on his face. "My grandpa." Connie covered her mouth with her hands, moved. Isabella felt her own tears begin to flow. Amidst all the chaos and danger that surrounded them, a 4-year-old child had just declared her chosen family with a single word. "Yes," Otto whispered, hugging her gently. "I'm your grandpa." It was in that moment of tenderness that the phone rang, brutally interrupting the family moment. Otto hesitated to answer, but the number was from his office. "Mr. Mendez?" It was his secretary, and her voice was clearly agitated. "You need to come here immediately." 2 men arrived saying they are federal investigators. They have search and seizure warrants. Otto's blood ran cold. "What kind of warrants?" "Regarding environmental irregularities and tax evasion." "Sir, they're taking all the computers, all the files, and they specifically asked about your personal routine, about where you live." The call was abruptly interrupted. Otto looked at the 3 women who were watching him, Connie, Isabella, and little Valentina, and realized that the situation had just become much more dangerous. "They got to my company," he said. "Ryan must have provided information about real or fabricated irregularities." "Or worse," Connie said grimly. "He may have invented evidence and planted it in your files." At that moment, the sound of cars approaching quickly from the mansion made everyone tense up. Otto ran to the window and saw 3 official vehicles stopping in front of the gate. "Federal police," announced an amplified voice from outside. "We have search and arrest warrants. Open the gate immediately." Valentina ran to hide behind Connie, but before disappearing completely, she looked at Otto with an expression that broke his heart. It was the same expression of abandonment she had had on the day of the wedding, the certainty that once again she would be separated from someone she had begun to love. "They're not going to take her from me," Otto said with steely determination. "Do whatever it takes to protect her." "And if they arrest you," Isabella asked, "then you 2 will take care of her until I get back." Connie picked up Valentina and headed to the back of the house. "There's a secret passage in the basement," she said quickly. "It was used in the old days to hide gold. I can take her there." "No," Otto said. "If I hide, I look guilty. I'm going to face this head-on." He knelt one last time in front of Valentina. "Remember what you called me today?" "Grandpa," she repeated, her little voice trembling. "That's right. And grandpas always come home. Always." The pounding on the front door became more insistent. Otto took a deep breath and walked towards the entrance, knowing that he was about to face one of the biggest battles of his life. Meanwhile, Valentina clutched the gold watch against her chest and whispered the first prayer she had learned on the streets. "Please don't let him go away like Mommy did." Connie hugged her tighter, whispering lullabies in her ear. trying to drown out the sound of the official voices that were beginning to invade the house. Outside, in the car that was watching everything from a distance, Ryan spoke on the phone with satisfaction. Yes, he's being arrested now. The girl was left alone, as you wanted. The voice on the other end of the line was cold and calculating. Perfect. Now we can start the second phase of the plan. That child is the key to everything. Ryan hung up the phone and smiled for the first time in days. Finally, things were going according to his new plan, a much more lucrative and perverse plan than simply borrowing money from his uncle. Inside the mansion, Valentina had just lost again the only father figure she had known, but this time she wasn't completely alone. And this time there would be people willing to fight for her. The real battle was just beginning. Otto's arrest lasted only 6 hours, but they were the 6 longest hours of Valentina's life since her mother disappeared. The girl refused to leave the corner where she had hidden during the police search, even after Connie repeatedly explained that the men in uniform had left. Her big eyes remained fixed on the door, waiting for Grandpa's return, but also prepared to see dangerous strangers enter again. "He'll be back, my little one," Connie repeated for the 100th time, trying to get Valentina to accept at least a glass of water. The lawyer said it was all a misunderstanding. But Valentina had learned on the streets that adults disappeared and never came back. Her experience said that promises were pretty lies that adults told to make children stop crying. Isabella, settled in the guest room, spent her time trying to contact acquaintances who could help Otto, but each call revealed the extent of the conspiracy mounted against him. The accusations were too specific, too well documented to be a coincidence. "Someone planted very elaborate evidence," she said to Connie while they watched Valentina playing listlessly with her cloth dolls. "Ryan isn't smart enough to orchestrate this alone. Then he has professional help," Connie replied grimly, "and that makes everything more dangerous." It was then that the house phone rang. Connie answered hesitantly, expecting bad news, but the voice on the other end surprised her. "Connie, it's Dr. Robert Anderson, Otto's lawyer. He's being released now, but I need to talk to you urgently. We discovered something about what's really going on." 2 hours later, Otto entered the house with a somber expression that contrasted with the relief of being free. Valentina ran to him as soon as she saw him, hugging his legs with a desperate force that almost knocked him over. "Grandpa came back," she whispered against his wrinkled dress pants. "Grandpa came back." "I promised I'd come back," he said, picking her up and feeling his own heart calm down for the first time in hours. "And grandpas always keep their promises." Dr. Robert Anderson, a short, stout man of 60 years, entered right after Otto carrying a bulky folder. His serious expression indicated that the news wasn't good despite the release. "Mr. Mendez, what we've discovered is much worse than we imagined," he said, sitting down in the living room and opening the folder on the table. "Ryan wasn't just trying to get money to pay off debts. He was executing an elaborate plan to destroy you completely." "How so?" Otto asked, still holding Valentina, who refused to leave his arms. "The investigations were based on anonymous tips made 3 months ago. The evidence found today was planted weeks ago in your company files. Someone had prolonged access to your systems." Dr. Anderson showed documents from the folder. "But the most disturbing thing is this." He placed photographs on the table that made Connie gasp in horror. They were photos of Valentina playing in the mansion's backyard, Valentina being taken by car to medical appointments, Valentina sleeping in her room, all taken through the windows of the house. "Someone has been watching the girl for weeks," the lawyer said. "And we know who." Isabella paled. "Ryan hired someone to photograph Valentina. Worse than that. We discovered that your husband made contact with a network of people who specialize in bespoke kidnappings, specifically of young children." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Valentina stopped moving, as if she could sense the gravity of what was being discussed. "Kidnapping," Connie murmured. "But why? To ask for ransom?" Not for ransom, Dr. Anderson replied gravely. For sale. There are very wealthy people who pay astronomical sums for small, vulnerable children, especially blonde, light-eyed girls who can be molded from an early age. Otto felt a murderous fury grow in his chest. Valentina has brown hair and dark eyes. She does now. But with a few cosmetic adjustments, you understand. The revelation was so monstrous that no one could fully process it. Ryan wasn't just trying to get money, he was planning to sell his own adopted cousin to people who would torture her in unimaginable ways. "How did you find this out?" Otto asked, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "Through the loan sharks who arrested Ryan this morning. When he couldn't pay his debts, they decided to collect in other ways." During the interrogation, Ryan confessed the whole plan, hoping to get a deal. Was he arrested? For a few hours, but he posted bail using the money he received as an advance from the transaction involving Valentina. The horror of the situation hit everyone simultaneously. Ryan had not only planned to sell the child, but had already received money for it. He was legally free and had the resources to execute his plan. "Where is he now?" Connie asked. "No one knows. He disappeared after posting bail. But we have reason to believe he's still in town, waiting for an opportunity." Isabella began to cry silently. "My God, what have I done? How could I marry such a monster?" "You didn't know," Connie said, hugging her. No one could imagine such a thing. At that moment, Valentina did something that surprised everyone. She climbed down from Otto's lap, walked to Isabella, and placed her small hand on the young woman's belly. "Baby," she said simply. It was one of the few words she had learned to say clearly. Isabella looked at the child through tears. "Yes, honey, there's a baby here." "Baby safe?" Valentina asked, her childish intuition picking up on something that the adults hadn't yet verbalized. The innocent question revealed another terrifying dimension to the problem. If Ryan was capable of selling Valentina, what would stop him from doing the same to his own child when he was born? "We need to get out of town," Otto said decisively. "Right now." "Where to?" Dr. Anderson asked. "Ryan has contacts. This network of people has national reach." "Then we're going out of the country." "With what documents?" "Valentina doesn't have a birth certificate, ID, nothing. Officially, she doesn't even exist." It was Connie who suggested the solution that no one had considered. "There's a farm in my sister's family, in upstate New York. Isolated place without easy car access. We can hide there while we sort out Valentina's documentation." "For how long?" Isabella asked. "For as long as it takes," Otto replied, "until Ryan is definitively arrested." Dr. Anderson shook his head. "You don't understand. The people Ryan got involved with don't give up easily. If they promise to pay for Valentina, they'll keep looking until they find her." "Then what do you suggest?" Connie asked. "That we disappear completely. New names, new lives, new place. It's the only way to ensure Valentina is truly safe." The proposal was too radical. It would mean abandoning everything, the company, the house, the life that Otto had built over decades. But when he looked at Valentina, who was playing innocently with her dolls, clueless about the danger that surrounded her, the decision became obvious. "Make the necessary arrangements," he said. "We're going to disappear." That night, while discreetly preparing for the escape, Valentina asked a question that broke the hearts of everyone present. "Grandpa, are we going away like Mommy did?" Otto knelt in front of her, holding her small hands. "No, my little one. Your mommy went away alone. We're going away together, forever together. Promise? I promise." But outside the mansion, hidden among the trees, Ryan watched the preparations through professional binoculars. He had noticed the strange activity in the house and deduced that they would try to escape. Next to him, a tall, thin man whispered instructions in his ear. "Let them get out of town. It's easier to intercept them on the road than here. And don't forget, The merchandise needs to arrive intact. Ryan nodded, his face transformed by a greed that had completely replaced any vestige of humanity he once possessed. The improvised family's escape was being planned, but the predators already knew all their movements. The chase was about to begin, and Valentina was at the center of a nightmare she couldn't even comprehend. Friday morning brought a thick fog that covered the mountains around Clear Creek, creating the perfect cover for the escape that Otto had meticulously planned throughout the night. At 4 a.m, when the city was still asleep, he carried sleeping Valentina to the car, wrapped in blankets to protect her from the Colorado chill. The girl woke up briefly, confused by the movement, but upon seeing Otto's familiar face, she fell back to sleep peacefully in his arms. "Everything's in the car," Connie whispered, carrying a small suitcase with essential clothes and the few toys that Valentina had become attached to. Money, documents, medicines, and enough food for 2 days of travel. Isabella emerged from the house carrying only a purse, her movements cautious due to the morning sickness she had begun to feel. Her pregnancy was still in its early stages, but the symptoms were already intense enough to make the trip uncomfortable. She looked back one last time, watching the house where she had found refuge and a real family for the first time in months. "I can't believe we're running away like criminals," she murmured, settling into the back seat next to Valentina. "We're not criminals," Otto replied, starting the engine of the dark sedan that he had chosen specifically for being discreet. "We are a family protecting a child." The word family echoed in the silence of the car, laden with meaning for people who had found themselves in the most difficult circumstances. Connie, in the passenger seat, looked in the side mirror and noticed a suspicious movement among the trees in the distance. "Otto," she said quietly, "someone's watching us." He checked the mirrors and saw what she had noticed, a metallic reflection among the vegetation, as if someone was using binoculars. "They know we're leaving," he murmured, accelerating smoothly so as not to wake Valentina. The road leading out of Clear Creek was winding and full of curves, cutting through the mountains covered by the morning fog. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed calm, just them and the asphalt wet with the morning dew. Valentina slept peacefully, occasionally murmuring incomprehensible words in her dreams. It was when they reached the first straight stretch of road that Connie noticed the headlights in the rearview mirror. "There's a car following us," she said, trying to keep her voice calm so as not to scare Valentina. Otto looked in the mirror and confirmed his worst suspicions. A dark car kept a constant distance behind them for at least 10 kilometers, even when he varied his speed. "It's them," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "What do we do?" Isabella asked, instinctively placing her protective hand on sleeping Valentina. "First, we don't panic," Otto replied, his decades of business experience kicking in. "Second, we change our destination. We can't take these men to your sister's farm, Connie." The next town was Aspen, 40 miles away. Otto knew the region well. He had done business there for years and knew alternative routes that could confuse the pursuers. But first, he needed to confirm his suspicions. At the next sharp curve, he drastically reduced his speed, forcing the car behind to get closer so as not to lose sight. That's when he clearly saw who was driving. Ryan, with 2 men he didn't recognize in the back seat. "It's Ryan," he said, his voice charged with a mixture of anger and sadness. "My own nephew is hunting us like animals." Valentina woke up with the change in the adult's tone of voice, her survival instincts alerting her to the danger even before she fully understood the situation. "Grandpa?" she whispered, seeking safety in Otto's eyes through the rearview mirror. "Everything's okay, little one," he lied, forcing a reassuring smile. "We're just going for a ride." But Valentina had learned to read the lies of adults. She sat up in the seat and looked out the back window, seeing the car that was following them. Her eyes widened when she recognized the man who had shouted at her on the day of the wedding. "Bad man," she said simply, pointing back. The cruel innocence of the observation hit everyone like a punch. A 4-year-old shouldn't need to categorize adults between good and bad based on who posed a physical danger to her. "Remember what we talked about hiding?" Connie asked, turning to Valentina. "How did you hide on the streets when there was danger?" Valentina nodded seriously. On the streets, hiding was a matter of life and death, and she had become an expert at it. "Can you hide under the seat now, like a game?" Without hesitating, Valentina slipped to the floor of the car, curling up in the narrow space between the seats. It was a position she knew well. Small, silent, invisible. Otto made a risky decision. Instead of continuing on the main road, he took a dirt detour he knew, an old mining road that cut through the dense forest. It was dangerous, especially with the fog, but it offered multiple exits and places to hide. The car began to rock on the uneven road, fully waking all the occupants. Isabella held onto the front seat, trying to control the nausea that was intensifying with the movement. Connie constantly checked to see if Valentina was safe on the floor. "They're still coming," Connie informed, watching Ryan's car try to navigate the dirt road with less skill. It was then that Otto realized his advantage. He knew that region intimately. Every curve, every fork, every place where the road split. Ryan and his henchmen were from the city and would not have the same knowledge of the terrain. "Hold on," he warned, accelerating on a steep descent that led to a valley covered by eucalyptus trees. "We're going to try to lose them in the woods." What he didn't expect was that Ryan had an updated GPS and radio communication with other cars. When they reached the end of the dirt road, they discovered that there was another vehicle waiting for them, a black SUV with tinted windows blocking the only exit. "It's a trap," Connie said, her voice controlled but tense. Otto stopped the car, quickly assessing his options. Behind them, Ryan was approaching. Ahead, unknown men were getting out of the SUV. On both sides, the dense forest seemed impenetrable. "We have to run on foot," he said. "It's the only chance." "With a 4-year-old child and a pregnant woman," Isabella protested. "It's better than handing Valentina over to those men," Connie replied, already opening the car door. Valentina emerged from her hiding place, watching the adults with big but calm eyes. Her experience on the streets had taught her that moments like these required absolute obedience and quick movement. "Grandpa, do we run now?" she asked, as if fleeing on foot from dangerous people was a normal activity. "Yes, little one, like a big adventure." They got out of the car and headed into the woods, Otto carrying Valentina, Connie helping Isabella, all moving as quietly as possible. The fog that had been their ally in the escape now became an obstacle, limiting visibility to a few meters. Behind them, they heard voices approaching. Ryan was shouting instructions to the other men, coordinating a systematic search. "They can't have gone far. The child will slow the group down, split up and surround the area." The eucalyptus forest was dense but navigable, full of old trails made by animals and rural workers. Otto chose a path that seemed to lead up the mountain, hoping to find a farm or road where they could ask for help. After 20 minutes of difficult walking, Isabella began to show signs of exhaustion. Her breathing was irregular, and she had stopped twice to combat waves of nausea. "I can't continue at this pace," she admitted, leaning on a tree. "There's a house up ahead," Connie said, pointing through the fog. "I can see light in the windows." It was a small wooden house, likely belonging to a caretaker or farmhand. Smoke billowed from the chimney, indicating someone was awake that early in the morning. "Let's ask for help," Octavius decided. But as they approached the house, they saw they weren't alone. Another car was parked out front, and it was identical to the SUV that had blocked their exit on the road. "They got here first," Connie whispered. "They know the area better than we thought." Valentina, still in Octavius's arms, watched everything with the seriousness of a child who had learned that her survival depended on quickly understanding dangerous situations. She didn't cry, didn't make a sound, just absorbed every detail of what was happening. "What do we do now?" Isabella asked, clearly at the end of her rope. That's when they heard the sound they all feared, dogs barking in the distance, rapidly approaching their location. They brought tracking dogs, Octavius said, despair finally showing in his voice. The hunt had become a professional pursuit, and they were being surrounded by people who clearly had experience capturing human beings. Valentina looked at Octavius and, with the cruel wisdom of a child who had survived on the streets, asked a question that no adult wanted to answer. "Grandpa, are they going to take me away from you?" The question echoed in the silent woods as the sound of the dogs drew closer, carrying with it all the broken promises and all the fears that a little child shouldn't have to know. The escape had become a trap, and time was running out quickly. The sound of the hunting dogs grew relentlessly louder when Valentina did something that surprised all the adults. Instead of cowering in fear as a normal child would, she slid from Octavius's arms and began to examine the surrounding terrain with the experienced eyes of a street survivor. "There," she whispered, pointing to a rock formation partially hidden by the mist. "Hole!" Connie followed the girl's gaze and saw what she had noticed, an opening in the rock that appeared to be a small, natural cave hidden by dense vegetation. It was exactly the kind of hiding place that a child accustomed to hiding from danger would instinctively identify. "How did you see that?" Octavius asked, impressed by the girl's observational skills. "On the streets, I always looked," Valentina replied simply. "Places where adults don't look." They moved quickly towards the opening, Connie helping Isabella, who could barely stand. The cave was small, but enough to shelter the four of them. And more importantly, it was invisible to anyone searching at eye level. Inside the makeshift hideout, huddled in the damp darkness, they heard the dogs pass less than 30 feet away. The men's voices echoed through the woods, coordinating the search with military efficiency. "Did you check the caretaker's house?" Rodrigo's voice was heard, closer than anyone would have liked. "Yeah, nobody's there. Must have left for work early," another man replied. "But we found footprints. They're around here." "The kid's slowing them down," said a third voice, cold and calculating. "They can't have gone far." Isabella covered her mouth to stifle a sob, terrified by the casual way they spoke about hunting a family. Valentina, nestled between Octavius and Connie, remained as silent as she had learned to be during her 2 years on the streets. It was during this tense wait that Connie made a discovery that would change everything. Trying to get more comfortable in the cramped space, her hand touched something metallic buried in the cave floor. Silently digging, she uncovered a small, rusty metal box. Octavius watched as she carefully opened the box, revealing old documents protected by plastic. Even in the dim light filtering through the cave entrance, he immediately recognized the handwriting. It was his own father's, who had died over 40 years ago. The first document he managed to read made his heart stop. It was a birth certificate, his own birth certificate, but with completely different information than he knew. According to the document, he wasn't an only child as he had always believed. He had a twin sister. "This is impossible," he murmured, his hands trembling as he held the yellowed paper. Connie looked at the document over his shoulder and paled. "Octavius, look at the date. Look at the mother's name." He read it again, more closely this time. The mother listed wasn't the woman he remembered as his mother, but Teodora Alves, Connie's maiden name. "My God," he whispered, looking at Connie with wide eyes. "You." "I'm your twin sister," she finished, tears streaming down her face. "I was separated from you when we were 2 years old. The family that adopted me told me a different version of the story, but I always knew I had a brother somewhere. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because when I finally found you, you were already a rich and powerful man, and I was just a housekeeper. I thought you wouldn't believe me, or worse, that you'd think I was trying to take advantage of the situation." The revelation was so shocking that for a few moments they completely forgot about the danger that surrounded them. Octavius looked at the woman who had worked in his house for 15 years, who had taken care of him during illnesses, who knew his habits better than anyone alive. And now he discovered that she was his sister. "That's why you always knew when I was lying," he said, a sudden understanding illuminating his face. "That's why you understood my moods, my fears." "Twins have a special connection," Connie replied. "Even separated, even without knowing." Isabella watched the family revelation with a mixture of emotion and urgency. "This is beautiful, but we need to focus on getting out of here alive," she whispered. It was Valentina who brought everyone back to the immediate reality. "Men gone," she said, having been listening intently to the sounds outside. "But they'll be back." She was right. The sound of dogs and voices had moved away, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the search returned to that area. "There's more in the box," Connie said, removing other documents. Among them was an outdated map of the area, marking locations that appeared to be abandoned mines and underground tunnels. "My father hid this here for some reason," Octavius said, studying the map. "Maybe he knew we'd need it someday." The map showed a network of tunnels connecting several mines in the area, some of which Octavius recognized as properties he had acquired over the years. If the map was correct, there was an underground passage that led directly out of the area where they were being hunted. "The nearest entrance is about 200 yards from here," he said, pointing on the map. "But we'll have to move during the day with them searching." "I'll go first," Connie said. "I'm older if they catch me." "No," Octavius interrupted firmly. "I just found out you're my sister. I'm not going to lose you now." It was Valentina who suggested the solution that no adult had considered. "I'll go," she said simply. "They look for whole family together. Don't look for girl alone." The suggestion was simultaneously brilliant and terrifying. A 4-year-old moving alone through the woods would have a much better chance of going unnoticed, but would also be completely vulnerable if discovered. "Absolutely not," Octavius said. "I'm not going to use you as bait." "Not bait," Valentina insisted with the raw logic of someone who had survived alone on the streets. "Smart way. I'm small. I know how to hide. I know how to be quiet." Connie studied the girl's determined face and recognized something familiar, the same stubbornness that she and Octavius had inherited from their father. "She's right," she said reluctantly. "It's our best chance." "What if something goes wrong?" Isabella asked. "Then at least she tried," Valentina replied, showing a devastating maturity. "Better to try than let bad men catch me." Octavius felt his heart break. That child, who should have been playing with dolls and learning the alphabet, was planning a reconnaissance mission that would determine the survival of all of them. "If you do this," he said, kneeling in front of her, "you need to promise me one thing. If there's any danger, any sign that they might see you, you run back here. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to save us. Just run." "I promise," Valentina said, then added with a small smile, "But Grandpa also has to promise he won't be mad if I succeed." The question revealed a lot about how she saw the world, always expecting to be punished for taking initiatives, even when trying to help. "I would never be mad at you for trying to protect us," he promised. Valentina left the cave with silent movements that impressed all the adults. In a matter of seconds, she had completely disappeared into the vegetation as if she had never existed. During the longest 40 minutes of their lives, Octavius, Connie, and Isabella waited in absolute silence. Every noise in the woods made their hearts race. Every movement in the leaves could be Valentina returning or their pursuers approaching. When she finally reappeared, sliding through the cave entrance like a small shadow, she brought information that completely changed their situation. "Found tunnel," she reported in a whisper. "But there's problem." "What kind of problem?" Connie asked. "Main bad man is there, waiting." The revelation sent a chill through everyone present. Rodrigo had anticipated that they would find the map and discover the tunnels. He was waiting for them on the only escape route they possessed. "There's more," Valentina continued. Heard him talking on the phone. He said if they don't get me today, they'll get the baby when it's born. Isabella instinctively placed her hands on her womb, her eyes filling with terror. The threat wasn't just against Valentina, but against the whole family they had become. What else did you hear? Octavius asked, knowing he needed all the information possible. He said, rich man from Denver getting impatient. Wants merchandise soon, or will cancel deal. The 4-year-old was reporting details of a human trafficking scheme with the same naturalness with which she might describe a doll game. It was a devastating image of how the world had failed her. But her information also revealed something crucial. There was time pressure on the kidnappers' side. If they missed that opportunity, they might lose the deal completely. That gives us an advantage, Connie said. They're desperate too. How so? Isabella asked. Desperate people make mistakes, Octavius replied, a plan beginning to form in his mind. And maybe it's time we stopped running and started fighting. The discovery that Connie was his sister had changed something fundamental in Octavius. For the first time in decades, he wasn't fighting alone. He had real family. Not just Valentina, but also the woman who had taken care of him for years, without him realizing the deep connection between them. What do you have in mind? Connie asked, recognizing the growing determination in her twin brother's eyes. We're going to use Rodrigo's own greed against him, Octavius said. And we're going to make sure he never threatens our family again. Valentina snuggled between the two adults who had just discovered they were siblings, not fully understanding the family dynamic she was witnessing, but instinctively feeling that something had changed for the better. The hunt was about to become a trap, but this time they would be the hunters. The plan that Octavius began to formulate in the cave was risky and depended entirely on the blind greed that had consumed Rodrigo. During the next 30 minutes, whispering in the damp hideout, the 4 fugitives developed a strategy that would turn the hunters into prey. Rodrigo believes we're desperate and cornered, Octavius explained, using a stick to draw on the cave floor. We're going to give him exactly what he expects to see, a terrified family trying one last, desperate escape. How does that help us? Isabella asked, holding her stomach that protested against the stress and lack of food. Because while he's focused on capturing us, he's not paying attention to what really matters, the evidence that can completely destroy him. Connie understood immediately. You want me to go back to town? Not you, Octavius said, looking at his newfound sister. Us, Valentina and I are going to give Rodrigo a chase he'll never forget, and you and Isabella are going back to Clear Creek. That's crazy, Connie protested. You're going to hand yourselves right over to him. Not hand ourselves over. Lure him away from you two and away from town, giving you enough time to gather the evidence we need. Valentina, who was listening intently, asked a question that showed how she understood the situation better than any adult would expect. Grandpa, you gonna use me as real bait? The direct question forced Octavius to confront the moral reality of what he was proposing. He was planning to use a 4-year-old as part of a dangerous operation against professional criminals. Not as bait, he replied carefully. As a partner, you know the woods, you know how to hide, you know how to run. And more importantly, you know me well enough to trust that I'll protect you. What if something goes wrong? Connie insisted. Then at least Valentina and I will be together, Octavius said, and you two will be safe and free to continue the fight. Isabella began to cry silently. I can't let you do this. Valentina's just a child. I'm not just child, Valentina corrected, with the seriousness that characterized her speeches. I'm child who knows how to survive, and Grandpa needs me. The maturity in the girl's voice was simultaneously impressive and devastating. She had fully incorporated the reality that her survival, and now the survival of her chosen family, depended on skills that no child should possess. What's the specific plan? Asked Connie, recognizing that the discussion had moved from if to how. Octavius explained his strategy. He and Valentina would leave the cave in a deliberately visible way, allowing Rodrigo's lookouts to see them heading for the higher mountains. This would draw the entire search operation away from town, giving Connie and Isabella time to return, gather incriminating documents, and contact the appropriate authorities. Doctor, Robert Anderson has copies of everything, Octavius said. The frauds, the contracts with loan sharks, the evidence of the trafficking scheme. But he needs time to organize them properly for the authorities. How much time can you give us? Connie asked. 6 hours, Valentina replied before Octavius could speak. I can keep men busy for 6 hours in the woods. Everyone looked at her, surprised by the specificity of the answer. How do you know? Isabella asked. Because I've done it before, on the streets, when cops looked for me or when bad men wanted to get me. Valentina paused, remembering episodes she preferred to forget. 6 hours is the maximum time before they get really mad and do worse things. Valentina's casual explanation of her experience running from bad men revealed a dimension of her previous life that none of the adults had fully understood. This child had developed evasion skills through repeated traumatic experiences. It's decided then, Octavius said. We leave in 2 hours when the sun is higher and visibility is better. Connie, do you know all the routes back to town? I know paths that even Rodrigo doesn't know exist, she confirmed. But Octavius, what if you can't escape after 6 hours? We will, Valentina said with confidence that surprised everyone. Grandpa is clever like me. The simple comparison touched Octavius deeply. To Valentina, they were a team, 2 survivors who had found each other. While they waited for the right moment to execute the plan, Connie took the opportunity to tell Octavius more details about her separated childhood. She had been adopted by a family of farmers who had treated her well, but she had always known that something was missing in her life. When she saw the job advertisement at the Mendez house years ago, she had applied, driven by an intuition she couldn't explain. I always knew you were my brother, she said. Not consciously, but something in me recognized something in you. That's why you could always calm me down when I was nervous, Octavius replied. That's why you knew exactly how I liked my coffee, how I would react to certain news. And that's why, Connie added, I know you're going to take care of Valentina and come home. When it was time to separate, Isabella hugged Valentina with tears in her eyes. You're the bravest child I've ever known, she said. I'm not brave, Valentina corrected, just want family to stay together. Connie kissed Octavius's forehead, the first truly familiar physical gesture between the twin siblings. Take care, brother, she said, and take care of our girl. Take care of yourself too, sister, he replied, the words still sounding strange, but right in his mouth. Octavius and Valentina left the cave, deliberately making noise, breaking branches, and talking loudly about looking for a way to the mountains. Within minutes, they heard the signs that they had been detected. Coded whistles, approaching footsteps, voices coordinating the chase. It worked, Valentina whispered, moving through the woods with an agility that impressed Octavius. Now comes the hard part, he replied, watching at least 6 men positioning themselves to surround them. During the next 2 hours, Octavius gained a new respect for Valentina's survival skills. She instinctively knew which plants made noise when stepped on, which animals indicated human presence, how to use the terrain to mask her movements. It was as if she had an internal GPS for navigating dangerous situations. That way, she would whisper, indicating routes that seemed impossible, but invariably led them away from their pursuers. Water hides our scent from the dogs. They crossed streams, climbed rocks, hid in dense bushes, always keeping enough distance to be detected occasionally, keeping the chase active, but never allowing themselves to be captured. It was during a rest stop, hidden behind a rock formation, that Octavius noticed something disturbing. Valentina wasn't just executing the plan, she was having fun. You're smiling, he observed. It's fun, she admitted. Like playing hide and seek, but for real. The observation revealed a dark truth about Valentina's childhood. For her, running from dangerous people had become a form of entertainment because it was the only activity in which she felt competent and in control. "When we get home," Octavius promised, "we're going to play games that normal children play. Games where no one is trying to hurt anyone." "Like what?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Normal hide-and-seek, tag, hopscotch. Games where the only thing you can lose is the fun." Valentina considered this for a moment. "But what if I'm better at the dangerous games?" The question broke Octavius's heart. "Then we'll find safe games where you're good too," he promised. At that moment, they heard Rodrigo yelling in frustration somewhere nearby. "They can't have disappeared. There are footprints everywhere." "The footprints lead in circles," another man replied. "It's like they know exactly how to confuse us." "The child," Rodrigo said with growing anger. "She knows these techniques. Where would a 4-year-old learn to do that?" The question revealed that Rodrigo was beginning to understand that he had drastically underestimated his prey. Valentina wasn't just a vulnerable child, she was a survivor trained by brutal circumstances. "How much longer?" Octavius asked. Valentina looked at the position of the sun with the precision of someone who had depended on natural navigation to survive. 2 hours, she said. "After that, they're going to get really dangerous." "How so?" "They'll stop trying to catch us without hurting us," she explained, with the devastating naturalness that characterized her observations about violence. "They'll start shooting first and asking questions later." The explanation showed that Valentina perfectly understood the escalation of violence that characterized desperate chases. Her experience on the streets had taught her to recognize when human hunters switched from capture to elimination. "Then we have 2 hours to finish this," Octavius said, "or to disappear for real," Valentina added. "I know places where even dogs can't follow us." Meanwhile, 25 miles away, Connie and Isabella arrived on the outskirts of Clear Creek, carrying with them the hope that 6 hours would be enough to save not only Valentina and Octavius, but the entire unlikely family they had become. The race against time had begun, and in the fog-covered mountains, a 67-year-old man and a 4-year-old child continued their deadly dance with predators who had no idea who they were really dealing with. While Octavius and Valentina continued their dangerous dance through the mountains, Connie and Isabella discreetly arrived at Dr. Robert Anderson's house on the outskirts of Clear Creek. The lawyer was waiting for them with a tense expression, surrounded by piles of documents he had organized overnight. "Did you manage to escape?" was his first question. "For now," Connie replied, still breathless from the fast walk. "But Octavius and Valentina are out there, keeping Rodrigo and his cronies busy. We have a maximum of 4 hours before the situation becomes impossible." Dr. Anderson showed the documents scattered on his desk. "I found much more than we expected. Rodrigo wasn't working alone. There's an entire network of people involved in this scheme." Isabella approached the table, recognizing some names on the papers. "This is Frederick, isn't it? The businessman from Denver." "Exactly. And we discovered that he's not just buying information about Octavius. He's one of the main financiers of the trafficking operation." Dr. Anderson showed bank statements. "In the last 6 months, he's transferred more than $2 million to accounts linked to the scheme." Connie studied the documents with growing horror. "How many children are involved in this?" "From what we've been able to track, at least 12 in the last 2 years. All between 3 and 7 years old, all in situations of social vulnerability." The revelation brought a new dimension to the danger they faced. It wasn't just about saving Valentina, but about exposing an operation that had destroyed dozens of families. "There's more," Dr. Anderson continued, opening another folder. "I discovered how Rodrigo really met these criminals. He was approached by them almost a year ago, when his gambling debts caught their attention." "How so?" Isabella asked. Professional loan sharks often identify desperate people who may be useful for other types of crime. Rodrigo was recruited specifically for having access to the home of a rich and single man. Connie felt a chill in her stomach. You mean he was being set up for this from the beginning? Worse. The marriage to Isabella was part of the plan. They needed him to appear stable and reliable when the time came to act. Isabella paled completely. My marriage, it was all planned. I'm afraid so. Rodrigo was instructed to find a young and naive woman who could serve as cover for his activities. The cruelty of the revelation hit Isabella like an avalanche. Not only had she been used, but her pregnancy was also part of the cold calculations of the criminals. A pregnant woman made Rodrigo less suspicious, more sympathetic, more trustworthy. There's something else, Dr. Anderson said hesitantly, about Valentina's mother. Connie and Isabella turned to him simultaneously. Marilia Santos didn't disappear on her own, he continued. She was kidnapped by the same network 2 years ago. They kept her alive specifically to use as psychological pressure on Valentina when the time came. The silence that followed was absolute. The discovery changed everything they thought they knew about Valentina's story. Is she still alive? Connie whispered. We believe so. There are records of monthly transfers to a rural property in upstate New York, listed as asset maintenance. Isabella began to cry. My God, that child spent 2 years believing that her mother had abandoned her, when in fact her mother was being held prisoner to ensure that Valentina would cooperate when she was captured, Dr. Anderson completed. The complexity and cruelty of the scheme was devastating. The criminals had planned not only to kidnap Valentina, but to psychologically break both the child and the mother, using the love between them as a weapon. Where is that property? Connie asked. About a 2-hour drive from here. But we can't just show up there. It's a well-guarded operation. At that moment, Dr. Anderson's phone rang. It was a contact in the FBI who had agreed to help discreetly. We have a problem, said the voice on the other end of the line. We've intercepted communications between the kidnappers. They're planning to accelerate the operation. What does that mean? Dr. Anderson asked. It means they're no longer trying to capture Valentina alive. The order now is to eliminate her if they can't get her in the next 2 hours. Dr. Anderson hung up and turned to the 2 women with a grave expression. Change of plans. We need to act now. Meanwhile, in the mountains, Octavius was beginning to realize that his pursuers had changed tactics. The men were no longer trying to surround them carefully. They were moving with an aggressive urgency that indicated different orders. Grandpa, Valentina whispered from her hiding place behind a rock. They're in a hurry now. That's bad. Why is that bad? Octavius asked, although he suspected the answer. Because when bad men are in a hurry, they stop caring if they hurt the people they want to get. Valentina's observation was confirmed moments later when they heard Rodrigo shouting new instructions. Change of plans. The client cancelled the order. Now it's just elimination. Octavius felt his blood run cold. Elimination meant that they were no longer trying to capture Valentina to sell her. They were trying to kill her to prevent her from testifying against them. What do we do now? Valentina asked, her practical maturity kicking in. Now we stop playing hide and seek, Octavius said, removing his cell phone from his pocket. And we ask for real help. He called Dr. Anderson, who answered immediately. Octavius, good to hear your voice. Where are you? In the mountains, about 9 miles northeast of town. But Robert, they changed the orders. They don't want to capture Valentina anymore. We know. We're mobilizing help now. Can you hold out for another 30 minutes? We'll try. During the next 20 minutes, Octavius and Valentina used all the survival skills they possessed. But it was clear that they were being systematically cornered. The men knew the area better than they had initially shown, and they had equipment that made escape increasingly difficult. It was when they hid in a small grotto that Valentina asked a question that changed everything. "Grandpa, do you think my mum is still alive?" The question revealed that despite all her forced maturity, Valentina was still a 4-year-old child carrying the pain of maternal abandonment. "Why do you ask that?" Octavius said carefully. "Because sometimes I dream about her, and in the dreams, she's not dead. She's trapped somewhere, crying for me." Valentina's childish intuition was dangerously close to the truth that Dr. Anderson had discovered. Octavius decided it was time to stop protecting her with lies. "Valentina, there are things about your mother that we discovered today." He gently explained that Marilia might be alive, but a prisoner. He explained that the bad men had lied about her leaving voluntarily. "I knew it," said Valentina, her eyes shining with tears of relief. "I knew Mom wouldn't really leave me alone." "If we can get out of here," Octavius promised, "we're going to find her." It was at that moment that they heard the sound they had been waiting for, helicopters approaching. But they also heard something that terrified them, gunshots being fired closer and closer to their location. "They're shooting!" Valentina cried. "But help is coming," Octavius replied, hugging her. "Hold on to me." The sound of the helicopters increased, and through the entrance of the grotto they saw official uniforms descending by ropes. It was the FBI finally arriving to rescue them. But Rodrigo had seen the helicopters too. In a last act of desperation, he appeared at the entrance of the grotto, blocking the only exit, holding a gun that pointed directly at Valentina. "If I can't have the money," he shouted over the noise of the helicopters, "at least I'll get revenge." Octavius positioned himself between the gun and Valentina, knowing that he had no way to physically protect her from a bullet. It was then that Valentina did something that no one expected. Instead of hiding, she came out from behind Octavius and looked directly at Rodrigo. "You're just like the other bad men," she said with devastating calm. "But not like my grandpa. He really protects me." The brutal simplicity of the comparison hit Rodrigo in a way that no adult had managed to. For a moment, he saw himself through the eyes of a 4-year-old child, and he didn't like what he saw. It was the moment of hesitation that the FBI agents needed. Rodrigo was tackled and disarmed before he could react. When silence finally returned to the mountains, Octavius held Valentina in his arms, both trembling from the proximity of the tragedy they had avoided. In the mountains of Colorado, as helicopters carried them back to civilization, a 4-year-old child and a 67-year-old man prepared to face the greatest challenge of their lives. Finding a woman who had been held prisoner for 2 years, waiting for the moment when she could embrace her daughter again. The rescue operation of Marilia Santos took place 2 days after Rodrigo's arrest on a remote farm in upstate New York that looked abandoned from the outside, but hid a sophisticated criminal operation. "Grandpa," she said, her voice small but firm, "now can we look for Mom?" "Now we can look for Mom," he promised. But they both knew that the real battle, reuniting a family that had been torn apart by criminals, was just beginning. Octavius had insisted on accompanying the FBI, despite protests about civilians in police operations. Valentina had stayed in town with Connie and Isabella, not knowing if her mother would really be found alive. Agent Martinez, responsible for the operation, had explained to Octavius that they had found evidence of at least 8 women held on the property over the past 3 years. "It's a human depot," he said coldly. "They keep the victims alive only as long as necessary to break their psychological resistance." When the agents raided the rural sheds disguised as stables, they found 6 women in deplorable conditions, all in different states of psychological trauma. Marilia Santos was in the second shed, huddled in a corner, her brown hair now prematurely grey, her body too thin, her large eyes carrying 2 years of indescribable horror. "Marilia?" Agent Martinez called softly, approaching carefully a woman who clearly associated the presence of men with danger. She looked up, but didn't respond. According to medical records found on the premises, she had stopped talking more than a year ago, retreating completely into herself as a defense mechanism. "Marilia, we've come to get you. Your daughter Valentina is safe," the agent continued. It was the first time in 2 years that someone had mentioned her daughter's name. Marilia raised her head slowly, her eyes focusing for the first time since the officers arrived. "Valentina," she whispered, the first word she had spoken in months. "She's alive, she's safe, and she's waiting for you," Octavius said, approaching slowly. "My name is Octavius Mendez. I've been taking care of her." Marilia studied the face of the elderly man, looking for signs of lies or danger. For 2 years, men had told her cruel lies about Valentina being dead, about no one looking for her, about being forgotten by the world. Distrust was etched on every line of her face. Where is she?" she asked, her voice hoarse from lack of use. "In Clear Creek, at my house, playing with dolls and learning to feel safe again," Octavius replied. "She draws birds all the time, birds flying free." The specific detail about the bird drawings hit Marilia like a revelation. It was something that only someone who really knew Valentina could know. Her childhood obsession with birds had started when she was a baby, fascinated by a mobile that Marilia had made with colored feathers. Does she remember me?" Marilia asked, tears beginning to stream down her thin face. "She never stopped believing that you would come back," Octavius said. "Even when they said you had left, she always knew it was a lie." During the transport to the hospital, Marilia remained silent, processing the reality that her imprisonment had ended. The doctors who examined her confirmed that, in addition to malnutrition and psychological trauma, she had not suffered permanent injuries, but emotional recovery would be a long and delicate process. "She's going to need time," explained Dr. Carla Mendonça, a psychiatrist specializing in trauma. 2 years of captivity create wounds that don't heal quickly, and the reunion with Valentina can be especially difficult. "How so?" Octavius asked. "Mothers who are separated from their children by trauma often develop complex feelings of guilt and inadequacy. She may feel that she has failed as a mother, that she has not protected Valentina adequately. But she was a victim too. Rationally, yes. Emotionally, trauma doesn't work with logic." Meanwhile, at Octavius's mansion, Valentina had been behaving strangely since she learned that her mother would be rescued. Instead of the joy that everyone expected, she was quiet and anxious, asking constant questions about what the reunion would be like. "What if she doesn't recognize me?" she asked Connie. "I've changed a lot." "Mothers always recognize their children," Connie replied, but internally worried about the same questions. "What if she's too hurt?" Valentina continued. "What if she can't love me the same as before?" The questions revealed a devastating emotional maturity. At 4 years old, Valentina already intuitively understood that trauma changed people, that love could be affected by suffering, that reunions weren't always automatic happy endings. "What if I forgot how to be her daughter?" was the most painful question she asked. Connie hugged the girl, realizing that she had verbalized the deepest fear of all children separated from their parents by trauma, that family bonds could be lost irreversibly. The reunion was scheduled to take place in the hospital, in a controlled environment with psychologists present to help if necessary. Octavius took Valentina, who was wearing her prettiest dress and carrying a drawing she had made especially for her mother. Birds flying towards the sun. When the doors of the room opened, mother and daughter saw each other for the first time in 2 years. The silence was absolute for long seconds. Marilia, sitting on the hospital bed, looked at the girl who had grown, changed, developed a personality she didn't know. Valentina, standing at the door, studied the thin and fragile woman who was still her mother, but who seemed different from her memories. "Mom," Valentina whispered hesitantly. "My little one," Marilia replied, her voice breaking, but neither of them moved. It was as if both needed permission to approach, as if trauma had created an invisible barrier between them. It was Octavius who broke the impasse. "Valentina, your mother is very tired from the trip. Maybe you can show her the drawing you made for her." Valentina approached slowly, extending the paper with colorful birds. "I drew free birds," she said. "Because now you're free too." Marilia took the drawing with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the artistic style that her daughter had developed. It was different from the drawings Valentina had made at 2 years old, more sophisticated, more expressive, but still carrying the same sensitive soul. "It's beautiful," she said, and for the first time in 2 years, smiled genuinely. "Do you want me to sit here?" Valentina asked, pointing to the bed. "I want it very much," Marilia replied. When Valentina climbed onto the bed and snuggled carefully next to her mother, avoiding sudden movements that might scare her, something magical happened. Despite all the traumas, despite the time lost, despite the changes that both had suffered, the maternal bond remained intact. "I missed you every day," Marilia whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "I knew you hadn't really left me," Valentina replied. "I dreamed about you crying and trying to come back to me." The conversation between them revealed that, even separated, mother and daughter had maintained an emotional connection that transcended physical distance. Valentina had dreamed of her mother as a prisoner, and Marilia had dreamed of her daughter growing up without her. "You're bigger," Marilia observed, studying Valentina's face. "I had to grow up fast," Valentina replied, with the brutal honesty that characterized her speeches. "But Grandpa Octavius taught me that growing up doesn't mean stopping needing Mom." The mention of Octavius made Marilia look at him with a gratitude that she couldn't express in words. "Thank you," she said simply, but the emotional weight of the word carried 2 years of relief. "She saved my life as much as I saved hers," Octavius replied. "Valentina taught me what real family means." During the next hour, mother and daughter talked hesitantly but affectionately, recognizing each other, adapting to the changes that time and trauma had created. Valentina told about her life on the streets, about finding Octavius, about learning to trust again. Marilia shared, with care appropriate for a child, about how she had thought of Valentina every day during her captivity. "Is Mom going to stay with me now?" Valentina asked eventually. "I'm going to stay close," Marilia promised, "but I need to get better first. I need to learn not to be afraid again." "I can teach you," Valentina offered. "Grandpa Octavius taught me that fear goes away slowly, a little bit each day." The offer of a 4-year-old child to help her mother overcome trauma touched everyone present deeply. Valentina had developed an understanding of emotional healing that most adults didn't possess. "You can live in my house," Octavius said. "There's room for everyone. Connie, Isabella, you, Valentina. We can be a big family." For the first time since the rescue, Marilia smiled with something that approached happiness. "A big family," she repeated. "Valentina always wanted to have a big family. Now I have one," Valentina said, hugging both her mother and Octavius. "I have Mom, Grandpa, Aunt Connie, Aunt Isabella, and the baby that's going to be born." The moment represented not only a reunion, but the birth of an unconventional family that had been forged by trauma, but held together by genuine love. But even in that moment of happiness, everyone knew that the journey of healing was just beginning. Reuniting a family broken by crime was only the first step of a long and delicate process. At the hospital window, birds flew freely against the blue sky of Colorado, just like in Valentina's drawings, symbols of hope for a family that had finally found its way back home. The real battle, learning to be a family again, was about to begin. 3 weeks after the reunion at the hospital, Octavius's mansion had completely transformed. What was once a silent and masculine house now vibrated with female voices, children's laughter, and the organized chaos of a real family. Marilia had been discharged from the hospital, but her emotional recovery was far from complete. "Mum, do you want to see my room?" Valentina asked on a sunny morning, gently pulling Marilia's hand. Marilia hesitated, as she did with any change of environment. After 2 years confined to small, controlled spaces, new places still made her anxious. "Maybe," she replied, allowing herself to be guided by her daughter. Valentina's room was a universe of colors and life. The walls were covered with drawings of birds, some made during her days on the streets, others created in the safety of Octavius's house. There were dolls organized carefully, storybooks, and a small bed with flowered sheets that Connie had chosen especially. "Here I draw," Valentina said, showing a low table. "And here I keep important things." She opened a small wooden box, revealing treasures that only a child would consider valuable. The gold watch that Octavius had given her on the first day, some colored pebbles found in the garden, and a crumpled photo. The only photograph that remained of Marilia. "You kept my picture," Marilia whispered, taking the worn paper with trembling fingers. "Every day I looked and said, 'Good night, Mom,'" Valentina explained. "Connie said you could hear me from far away." The simplicity of the revelation broke something inside Marilia. During 2 years of captivity, she had wondered if Valentina remembered her, if she missed her, if she had given up waiting. Discovering that her daughter had maintained a daily ritual of connection made her cry for the first time since the rescue. "Mom is sad," Valentina asked, worried. "I'm happy," Marilia corrected, hugging her daughter. "Sometimes when we get very happy, we cry too. Like when you found that doll I lost," Valentina remembered. "Exactly like that." In the lower floors of the house, Connie and Isabella watched the interaction through the bedroom window, both touched by the gradual progress of the relationship between mother and daughter. "She's getting better," Connie commented. "Last week, Marilia could barely stay in the same room as Valentina for more than a few minutes." "Trauma changes people," Isabella said, unconsciously touching her belly that was beginning to show signs of pregnancy. "Sometimes I'm afraid of how I'm going to be as a mother after everything we've been through." "You're going to be great," Connie assured. "Women who survive difficult things often become stronger mothers." Octavius appeared in the room carrying legal papers. "I finally got it," he announced. "Valentina's adoption has been made official. Now she's legally my granddaughter, even though Marilia is her biological mother." The legal arrangement had been complex, but Dr. Robert Anderson had found a solution that respected both Marilia's maternal rights and Valentina's need for legal stability. Octavius had officially become her legal guardian, while Marilia retained all maternal rights. "How did Marilia react?" Connie asked. "She was relieved," Octavius replied. "Said she doesn't feel strong enough yet to be solely responsible for Valentina, but wants to maintain the maternal bond." It was an arrangement that worked for everyone involved. Valentina had the security of a stable family, Marilia had time to recover without pressure, and Octavius officially had the daughter that his heart had chosen. The afternoon brought an unexpected challenge. Valentina was playing in the garden when an unknown man appeared at the gate, a journalist who had discovered the story through police leaks. "Mr. Mendes, can I ask you some questions about the child trafficking case?" he shouted, pointing a camera at the house. Valentina immediately ran inside, her survival instinct activated by the presence of strangers. But instead of hiding as she used to, she looked for Octavius. "Grandpa, there's a strange man outside," she reported calmly. "I know, honey. It's just a journalist. He's not going to hurt us." "But I don't like it when strangers know where I live," Valentina said, verbalizing a perfectly rational fear for a child who had been hunted by criminals. Octavius made a decision. How about we move to the farm that Connie mentioned? Quieter place, no journalists. We're all going together? Valentina asked. All together, as a family. The idea of moving initially scared Marilia, who had developed agoraphobia during her captivity. But when Valentina explained that it would be a family adventure, she agreed to try. I'll take care of you, Valentina promised her mother, like you took care of me when I was little. The role reversal, child taking care of the mother, was simultaneously touching and worrying. It showed both Valentina's forced maturity and the fragility in which Marilia still found herself. A week later, the expanded family moved to a farm in upstate New York, owned by Connie's sister, who had temporarily relinquished it. It was an isolated place, with green fields, domestic animals, and most importantly, total privacy. "It's like in my drawings!" exclaimed Valentina when she saw the property. "There's room for all the birds to fly." For Marilia, the farm represented something different. Space without walls, without confinement, without the claustrophobic feeling that had haunted her since the rescue. For the first time in months, she was able to breathe deeply. "It's beautiful here," she said, allowing Valentina to guide her through the fields. "We can plant flowers," suggested Valentina, "and have our own garden, like Grandma Connie said." The possibility of creating things, of seeing growth instead of destruction, touched something deep in Marilia. For years, her life had been about survival. Now maybe it was time to learn to live again. That night, during the family dinner in the rustic kitchen of the farm, something magical happened. Marilia laughed, a genuine and spontaneous laugh, when Valentina told a funny story about the chickens trying to steal food from the pigs. It was the first truly happy sound she had produced since the rescue. "Mom laughed," Valentina said, as if she had witnessed a miracle. "Your daughter is very funny," Marilia said to Octavius. "Has she always been like this?" "She taught me to laugh again too," he replied. "Children have that magical ability." Isabella, watching the family scene, placed her hand on her belly. "I hope my baby has that joy," she said. "It will," Valentina assured, with the absolute confidence that only children possess, "because it will grow up in a family that truly loves each other." That night, for the first time since the reunion, Marilia managed to put Valentina to sleep alone, singing a lullaby that she had sung when her daughter was a baby. Her voice was hoarse and uncertain, but the melody remained intact in her memory. "Mum, are you going to sleep in the room next door?" Valentina asked. "I will, and if you have nightmares, you can call me." "And if you have nightmares, you can call me too," Valentina offered. The simple exchange represented a new family dynamic, mother and daughter taking care of each other, recognizing that both carried scars that needed time to heal. When Marilia left the room, she found Octavius waiting in the hallway. "Thank you," she said, "for the 100th time since the rescue." "What for this time?" he asked, already accustomed to the constant gratitude she expressed. "For teaching my daughter that family isn't about blood. It's about choice." "She taught me the same thing," Octavius replied. That night, on the silent farm in upstate New York, an unconventional family slept for the first time, truly in peace. Octavius in his room, Connie in hers, Isabella in the guest room, Marilia and Valentina in adjacent rooms with open doors. They were 5 people whom fate had brought together through suffering, but who had chosen to remain united through love. Outside, nocturnal birds sang among the trees, and for the first time in years their songs sounded like music, not like a reminder of lost freedom. Healing was happening slowly, day after day, scar after scar. 6 months after moving to the farm, Saturday morning brought a surprise that would change everything once again. Valentina, now 5 years old, ran to Octavius's room carrying an envelope that had arrived in the mail. "Grandpa, there's a letter for you," she announced, jumping on the bed where he was still resting. The envelope contained an official notification that made Octavius smile for the first time in weeks. The case against the human trafficking network had been concluded, with all the victims receiving substantial compensation from the government. More importantly, Frederick and his associates had been sentenced to decades in prison. "What does it say?" Valentina asked, studying her grandfather's expression. "It says that the bad men will never be able to hurt other children again," he explained, "and that our family will receive money to help with all the things we need." "Do we need money?" she asked, confused. For Valentina, who had lived on the streets with nothing, the farm already seemed like a palace of abundance. "Not to survive," Octavius said, "but maybe to help other children like you." The idea of helping other children awakened something special in Valentina. During the months on the farm, she had demonstrated a natural empathy for any vulnerable creature: wounded animals, withered plants, even sad adults. "Can we make a house for children who don't have a family?" she suggested. "That's exactly what I was thinking," Octavius replied, impressed with the maturity of the suggestion. That same day, during the family lunch, Octavius shared the news and Valentina's idea. The rustic kitchen table was complete. Him, Connie, Marilia, Isabella, who was now clearly showing a 7-month pregnancy, and Valentina. "An orphanage?" Marilia asked, her first reaction being one of concern. "So many traumatized children. Would we be able to help adequately?" "Not a traditional orphanage," Octavius explained. "Something smaller, more familiar. A house where children can recover before finding permanent families." "Like a temporary big family," Valentina said, simplifying the concept with her childish logic. Connie, who had spent the last months rediscovering her maternal vocation, taking care of Marilia and Valentina, perked up at the possibility. "I could help. I have experience with traumatized children now." "And me too," Marilia added, surprising everyone. "I know what it's like to feel lost and scared. Maybe that will help me help other people." Marilia's suggestion represented a milestone in her recovery. For the first time since the rescue, she was proposing to use her experience of trauma for something constructive, instead of just trying to forget. Isabella, holding her belly, smiled. "My baby will grow up in a house full of children who need love. I can't imagine a better environment." During the following weeks, the project took concrete form. Dr. Robert Anderson helped with the legal aspects, transforming the farm into an official temporary foster care institution. Connie used her contacts in the community to identify children in vulnerable situations. Marilia, with continued psychological support, began to prepare to help other victims of trauma. House of Free Birds was the name that Valentina suggested for the institution. "Because all the children will learn to fly again." The name was accepted unanimously, and Valentina was designated as Official Consultant of Child Well-Being, a title created especially to recognize her unique contribution based on her own experience. The first child arrived on a rainy winter afternoon. It was Miguel, a 6-year-old boy who had been found abandoned in Aspen. He was dirty, malnourished, and completely mute, just like Valentina had been months ago. "Hi," said Valentina, approaching him with the naturalness that only children possess. "I'm Valentina. Do you want to see my drawings?" Miguel didn't respond, but his eyes followed Valentina when she went to get her drawing notebook. She showed the birds she drew, explaining each one with infinite patience. "This one is learning to fly," she said, pointing to a bird with open wings. "Like us. Sometimes it falls, but it always tries again." To everyone's surprise, Miguel reached out and touched the drawing. It was the first sign of interest he had shown since his arrival. "Do you want to draw too?" Valentina offered. During the next hour, she taught Miguel to draw simple birds, constantly talking about how birds were free to fly wherever they wanted, how no one could hold them forever. "She has a gift," commented Marilia, watching her daughter work with Miguel. "She knows exactly what to say." "Because she went through the same thing," Connie replied. "Traumatized children understand each other in ways that adults can't." In the following weeks, more children arrived. Anna, 4 years old, found wandering alone after the arrest of relatives involved with drugs. Carlos, 7 years old, whose parents had been killed in urban violence. Lucia, 5 years old, a victim of severe neglect. Each child brought their own scars, their own fears, their own ways of surviving, but all found in Valentina someone who understood their language of trauma without needing explanations. "Why aren't you afraid of us?" Carlos asked one afternoon, referring to the fact that many adults were intimidated by the aggressive behavior that traumatized children often exhibited. "Because I know you're not really bad," Valentina replied. "You're just scared like I was." The simple wisdom of her answers often surprised the psychologists who visited the farm. Dr. Paula Martins, a specialist in child trauma, observed that Valentina had intuitively developed therapeutic techniques that took professionals years to learn. "She creates immediate emotional connection because she doesn't judge," the doctor explained to Octavius. For these children, finding someone who understands their suffering without trying to fix them immediately is revolutionary. The most emotional moment came when Isabella gave birth to her daughter Sophia. The birth took place on the farm itself, assisted by an experienced midwife, surrounded by the chosen family and the fostered children. "She was born into a big family," said Valentina, watching the baby with fascination. "She's going to have many brothers and sisters to play with." "Temporary brothers and sisters," Connie corrected. "Most of these children will find permanent families. But they will always remember that they were loved here," Valentina said with the confidence of someone who had experienced it personally. In the months that followed, 5 of the 7 fostered children found adoptive families through the network of contacts that Octavius had developed. Each departure was celebrated as a victory, but also brought tears of longing. "Why is it sad when something good happens?" Miguel asked on the day he was to be adopted by a couple of teachers from Denver. "Because loving people means missing them when they leave," Valentina explained, "but missing them is proof that the love was real." The answer, coming from a 5-year-old girl, touched all the adults present deeply. Valentina had learned to articulate complex emotional truths through her own experience of loss and reunion. A year after the opening of the House of Free Birds, the farm had become a regional reference in the rehabilitation of traumatized children. Valentina, now 6 years old, had helped more than 20 children prepare for new families. "Don't you want to be adopted too?" asked one of the younger children, not understanding why Valentina stayed while others left. "I've already been adopted," she replied, looking at Octavius, who was nearby, "by this whole family. And now my job is to help other children be adopted too." On the afternoon of her 6th birthday, Valentina received a special surprise. Marilia had managed to overcome her trauma sufficiently to officially assume the pedagogical coordination of the institution. It was her way of turning suffering into purpose. "Now I'm officially a teacher for the children who come here," she announced during the birthday party in the farm's garden. "And I'm the official assistant," declared Valentina, proud of the role she had naturally developed. As she watched her daughter play with the other fostered children, all laughing and running free through the green field, Marilia felt a peace that she hadn't experienced in years. The trauma would never disappear completely, but she had found a way to make sense of the suffering. "She saved us all," she said to Octavius, watching Valentina teach a new child to draw birds. "And she will continue to save others," he replied. "That's what true survivors do. They transform their pain into healing for others." That afternoon, as the sun set over the farm's fields, Valentina climbed her favorite tree carrying her drawing notebook. It was her daily ritual, drawing birds flying towards the horizon. But this time, her drawing was different. Instead of solitary birds, she drew an entire flock. Birds big and small, all flying together in the same direction, taking care of each other during the journey. "Where are they flying?" asked Sophia, now a 1.5 years old, who had climbed the tree after her older sister. "Home," Valentina replied simply. All the birds, in the end, fly home. And there, in the tree that had become her private observatory, surrounded by a family that she had chosen and been chosen by, Valentina continued drawing free birds against the infinite sky of upstate New York, knowing that she had found not only her own freedom, but also a way to give wings to other lost children. The girl who had once been dragged by her hair out of a wedding had become the guardian of hope for children who, like her, needed to learn that it was possible to fly again after having their wings broken. At the House of Freebirds, everyone learned that family wasn't about where you were born, but about where you chose to build your nest. And Valentina, at 6 years old, already knew that she had built hers to last forever.